gastroenteritis, inflammation of the liver. And the third is alcoholic cirrhosis. So ultimately, as you know, as in the past lectures, that the outcome of most chronic liver diseases is cirrhosis. So the last outcome is cirrhosis and or cellular carcinoma. So this is a diagram from your textbooks to show you how this is the normal liver, and a certain amount of exposure, a milder exposure, will lead to steatosis in the liver, that is fatty change, and maybe a little bit of fibrosis, which after the exposure is removed, after abstinence, can go back to normal. If the exposure is severe, as in binge drinking, it can again into the problem with binge drinking, and that can happen if there is some disease of chronic alcohol. Abstinence and exposure continues, it will go to alcoholic hepatitis, and then gradually it will lead to cirrhosis. So continuous exposure to the injurious agent, which here is alcohol, to inflammation and then cirrhosis. How much can cause this? So although they say that a lot of things are given in your textbook, okay? So 80 grams of alcohol per day, some say 2 drinks in a day for men and 1 in a woman, okay? The threshold is what is important to remember, that is 50 to 60 grams per day is the threshold beyond which they say that if this sort of beyond this threshold alcohol intake continues, then alcoholic liver disease is more likely to occur. There is a lot of variability. Not everyone, all this, it is gone to alcohol. Hepatitis or cirrhosis. So most people will have some amount of alcoholic steatosis at least, and some percentage of those grams per day is line for severe injury. That is, over a long period of time, alcoholic hepatitis and cirrhosis will occur. My voice is breaking. Can you tell me if the voice is still breaking or if it can be heard properly now? No, meaning it's not breaking or it's not heard? Okay, thank you so much. So, now, when there is already an underlying alcoholic injury, the consumption of acetaminophen, which is a very commonly used drug, like paracetamol, it's the same. So the injury reporting are at high a day and MEM2 considered to be a safe limit, beyond which it can cause chronic consumption can cause alcoholic liver injury. And then there are, of course, genetic factors for increased risk. So someone's this is a story which my head of hepatology used to tell very often in when we used to celebrate the hepatitis day and lectures were given for the general population, that there's a patient whose father who used to come to him with mild alcoholic steatosis. Now his son came to him with very severe alcoholic liver disease because of some genetic factors. The son had a more severe alcoholic liver disease, where after a shorter period of consumption of alcohol, whereas the father did not have much of liver disease. So that sort of a problem can occur. And this is sort of a little diagram to show you the sort of alcoholic liver injury that can occur. So, the equivalent amounts, whether it is wine or beer or different of alcohol, different quantities is then the total amount that can be safely consumed. Now, what happens in alcoholic liver injury? So there are several. The first step, like I told you, was steatosis. So what is the reason for the steatosis? Now, the first step in steatosis is the presence of decreased production of the fat within the liver. There is decreased fatty acid oxidation. There is a reduction in adipocytokines, and therefore these are also is this alcoholic steatosis that occurs. And let me take you to the next slide first. So what happens with this is that with excessive alcohol, on the one hand, we have NAD converting to NADH with alcohol dehydrogenase, which is getting consumed, and also NADP and releasing reactive oxygen species. This is by the inherent microsomal ethanol oxidizing system. Now, both of these will, on the one hand, lead to the production of acetaldehyde, which in itself is a toxic substance, which further then undergoes aldehyde dehydrogenase and gets converted to acetate. So, what are the various factors here that are going to cause the injury? One, the presence of this NADH will also affect the mitochondrial function. The alcohol on its own can also affect the cytoskeleton and mitochondrial function. The oxygen that is released, the reactive oxygen species, these damage the membranes of the hepatocytes. The acetaldehyde is one of the very toxic components which will induce lipid peroxidation, and it forms what are called acetaldehyde protein adducts. That is joint forms of acetaldehydes and proteins, and these adducts disrupt the cytoskeleton and membrane further. So all of these will lead to injury to the liver. So this injury to the liver, in addition to fatty acid synthesis and accumulation, will lead to, now we'll go to the previous slide, will lead to production of various cytokines which are brought into this region. In addition, this hepatocyte damage brings neutrophils into the liver, and these neutrophils themselves are also producing certain cytokines, are causing cytokines like interleukins and TNF alpha. In addition, there is bacterial translocation. There is a large component of the gut microbiota that in alcoholic liver disease plays a significant role, and therefore it is presumed that it is the differences in this gut microbiota that are responsible for some people having a more severe injury with the same amount of alcohol consumption as opposed to others. So let's look at the gross morphology. The gross morphology of the liver, here it is called a fatty liver, because the first step is steatosis. So in a fatty liver, the liver is enlarged. It is yellowish in color because of the accumulated fat, and it is soft because at present no inflammation or fibrosis there to cause it to be firm or fibrous. So it is soft. The cut section of the fatty liver, which will show you the similar appearance of a large yellowish soft fatty liver, and as the disease progresses, it converts to alcoholic. Now, what are the complication is death. Death could be due to hepatic failure. Why can hepatic failure occur? If there is a severe hepatic failure can occur. So a severe binge drinking on already compromised liver can cause that. Massive GI hemorrhage due to portal hypertension when there is advanced fibrosis or cirrhosis. Cirrhosis itself can lead to hepatocellular carcinoma and an underlying alcoholic hepatitis base for increased intercurrent infections. And this itself can also be a cause of sepsis and then death. Then, of course, we've already told you in the previous lectures about the hepatorenal syndrome, which can be caused because of hepatic failure, which is either acute or after a chronic cirrhosis and then hepatic failure. Pathogenesis I've already described to you. So the ethanol, it causes increased fatty acid synthesis, fatty acid oxidation, increased triglyceride production, and increased lipolysis in other tissues. And all this leads to accumulation of fat in the liver. In addition, there is a decreased lipoprotein release and increased NADH formation, which I showed you in the previous diagram. All these will lead to, again, increased decreased clearance of drug. Therefore, some drugs will have an exaggerated toxicity in the liver because there is no clearance of the drug. The normal metabolism and clearance of the drug is hampered, and therefore there is increased toxicity of a drug which under normal circumstances may not cause any hepatic injury. Why? Because cytochrome P450 is now induced. And this induction of cytochrome P450 will lead to conversion of drugs into toxic metabolites. Then we also discussed the free radicals that are produced. So reactive oxygen signals can be on the hepatic neoantigens. So that is the Can you let me know if I'm audible now, or am I still not audible? Okay, I'll continue and then you can let me know if I'm not audible. So we already know that there is one parameter that is actually another parameter that we now know of, which is non-alcoholic steatohepatitis, which unfortunately is related to obesity. Now, non-alcoholic steatohepatitis is something that was described first in 1980 by Ludwig et al. And this description was given by Ludwig, who is a hepatopathologist, for a histological picture like alcoholic hepatitis, wherein there was no history of or clinical evidence of alcohol. And this was in females who were obese or diabetics or with hyperlipidemia. So he described this and published So it happens close to the central veins. And it is after that that it involves the and this metabolic syndrome is defined when there is obesity and insulin resistance, dyslipidemia, or hypertension. And this obesity is described either by a body is raised or by a waist hip ratio that is raised. Of the liver. So steatosis is the steato component of the terminology, lobular inflammation and ballooning are the itis components. Inflammation means inflammatory cells have come. Ballooning, I've already told you, when the cells become and pale cytoplasm. Those are balloon hepatocytes, and those are an evidence of liver injury. So when you have evidence of liver injury, inflammation, and steatosis, you have the steatohepatitis. The other features that are important, I've highlighted in bold, the rest you don't need to look at. Mallory's hyaline, that is Mallory-Denk bodies, which I'll just show you, and zone 3, perisinusoidal fibrosis. These are the other features that you see. So let's have a look at it. This is a portal tract. Now, near the portal tract, there isn't much going on, but away from the portal tract where the central veins are there, there is steatosis. This is another biopsy. Zone 3, around this, you are seeing these fat globules which are present in the hepatocyte, distending the hepatocytes. You can't make out the hepatocyte, what you can see is the fat. So this is macrovesicular large droplet steatosis in the hepatocyte in zone 3 region, which is the first component of alcoholic or non-alcoholic steatohepatitis. Sometimes you can get these small droplets and large droplets. So mixed micro and macrovesicular steatosis, part of the steatosis component. The second component is lobular inflammation. So here you see these inflammatory cells where the arrows are pointing along with the fat. So once you see inflammatory cells destroying these underlying hepatocytes, then that is lobular inflammation. This is a higher power view to show you this inflammatory cells, and usually in alcoholic steatohepatitis it is neutrophils. In non-alcoholic you can get neutrophils or you can get lymphocytes, and sometimes these inflammatory cells are completely surrounding a steatotic The arrow seems to have moved, hepatocyte, and that is called satelitosis. This is another example where the neutrophils are completely surrounding the fatty hepatocyte, and that is called satelitosis. Doing this is another necessary component. So these large pale hepatocytes, these are the ballooned hepatocytes, higher power, rather bigger magnification. So these larger hepatocytes, if you can see the arrow, are the ballooned hepatocytes. In the background, you can see this steatosis. In addition, what we see is here, we are seeing influences, we are seeing this within the ballooned hepatocyte is the Mallory hyaline. This is another example to show you this Mallory hyaline. Mallory hyaline is typically described as eosinophilic ropey clumpy material which is present in the ballooned hepatocyte, and it is usually in a perinuclear location. So this eosinophilic clumpy material is the, and you can see another very severe extreme example of this eosinophilic clumpy material in a case of severe alcoholic hepatitis. Now, the fibrosis that occurs in these is typically what is described as a chicken wire, jaliwala fibrosis. Okay, so this is the pericellular. In viral hepatitis, we saw more of portal and periportal fibrosis, whereas in steatohepatitis, we see perivenular fibrosis in zone 3 and alcoholic. Now, we don't need to look at this table. I don't need you to look at this table at all. You need to remember the features I've told you. They can be of NASH or ASH. And the important thing to remember is that, like a leopard and a cheetah, unless you know some background, it is very difficult to distinguish histologically. And the mainstay of the differential diagnosis is presence of clinical history. So if there is a clinical history of taking alcohol in quantities that would be considered as alcoholic abuse or more than what is normal, or there is a history of or diabetes, hyperlipidemia, or hypertension, and of course the two can overlap. There could be an alcoholic who's obese and diabetic, right? So that would just be, further injury. Then it's alcoholic, treat weight and treat the diabetes, right? So now in children, there is just one point to remember, that although children can get the same pattern that we've seen, that I've described to you, there is one difference that can occur in a certain percentage of children, that instead of the usual zone 3 pattern of injury, they can get an injury in zone 1, that is portal inflammation. There is steatosis and there is portal inflammation rather than zone 1. And there is portal fibrosis rather than the pericellular chicken wire fibrosis. So sometimes in children that pattern can be seen. So if there is an obese child you have to do banding as we described earlier for when we were talking about portal hypertension. Now let's come to the second part, and therefore I will probably go 10 minutes over the time. The second part is, now don't look at various that can occur in the liver as are given in your textbook, but there are a large number of tumors that can occur in the liver. And the one that we are going to talk about today is only hepatocellular carcinoma and the precursor lesions of hepatocellular carcinoma. So mass of hepatocytic origin, and that too only hepatocellular carcinoma. So let's not get tangled, as my headphones were earlier and you couldn't hear me. And let's talk about hepatocellular carcinoma. So the average age can be range from 20 to 60. Of HPV is lower by around 20 years. So it could be 40 years in HPV. And the incidence of hepatocellular carcinoma in a patient of HPV in an HPV endemic area is extremely high. This is from your textbook, 23. A common condition will end up with tyrosinemia, with the disease, the patient will be screened, and in those cases, the by radiological screening, ultrasound and CT scan, any nodular lesion that is of more than 2 centimeters in size or has a characteristic radiology or a high serum AFP will be considered as possible hepatocellular carcinoma. Serum AFP is not reliable enough because in 50% of cases it is not high, and unless it is very high, more than 1,000 or 5,000, only then we start thinking of HCC. Secondly, it can be high in other tumors that produce alpha fetoprotein. So serum AFP alone is not good enough. Radiological and serological combination is important. I'm okay, so I was wondering if that call is for from someone from the class, but anyway. So now coming to the pathogenesis. Now, as we know, chronic liver disease goes into cirrhosis to hepatocellular carcinoma. Why? Because cirrhosis has regenerating nodules. So the hepatocytes are, and as they are regenerating, they pick up mutation. If there was already an existing underlying mutation, now you picked up the double mutation, and that is a risk for carcinoma, as you know in tumor suppressor genes, which you have already studied. And for hepatocellular carcinoma, the two most important pathways are the P53 tumor suppressor gene mutation and beta catenin or CTNNB1 mutations, which lead to hepatocellular carcinoma. So what are the precancerous lesions? The precancerous lesions are a dysplastic focus or nodule and a small HCC, and these are obviously occur large, and they have but increased NC ratio because of the fact that the nuclei are very large and bizarre. So this is called large cell change, and this is on your left panel is small cell change. Small cell change has a higher risk of developing hepatocellular carcinoma than large cell change. This is a gross picture of a liver nodule of hepatocellular carcinoma. It can be as small as about 2 centimeters or more, or it could be much larger. Now, histology and then you can sometimes get this Nothing is audible. Am I audible now? Am I audible now? Okay, I'm sorry. I think the internet connection was lost and is now reestablished. So what is the last part heard? The audio keeps going on and off. I'm so. What is the last part that you heard clearly? Anyway, right now I'll just continue with this and I'll ask them in the tooth to be if they can take it up properly again. So this is a fibrolaminal radio ablation or chemotherapy induced ablation, that is called TACE, or it can just be downsized